to the first town hall of 2020. I'm going to start with Brooke. She's here to talk about Measure Q, the parks measure, and this is really exciting. I have a yard sign in my yard, and the RCPC board has officially endorsed Measure Q.
So first I want to say thank you to RCPC for endorsing Measure Q, which is on the March 3rd, 2020 ballot. A lot of people haven't gotten your ballots in the mail yet. You haven't gotten your voter pamphlets in the mail yet, but a lot of people are not really aware that the California primary is going to be on March 3rd. So I just want to put that number out there, that date out there for all of you as a public service announcement. It did get moved from June to March. So within a few weeks, you'll be getting your voter pamphlet, and then you'll be getting, if you have a vote by mail, you'll be getting that. How many of you vote by mail? Okay. It's about 50% of the population in our area vote by mail. The other 50% still go into the voting booth. So, Measure Q. Measure Q came together by myself and a group of other advocates who knew there was a need for increased park maintenance in Oakland, going to the city and saying we really need support, we really need space on a ballot when there's nothing else that's of critical need, to put forth a measure for park maintenance. Park maintenance has been decimated in Oakland. It's been decreased over many years, and in 2008, 50% of the park maintenance staff and the tree staff in Oakland were cut, and they have never been restored. So we embarked upon this process, got a commitment for having 2020 as our year, didn't know whether it was November or March, and then March was decided by the city. We did a poll, and the polling came back that it was, it takes a 2/3 vote to pass, and it was just right around there, hovering around 2/3, but a little bit less. And we knew that would be a tough battle, but the number one issue in the city of Oakland, according to the poll, is homelessness and housing affordability. So the council wanted another poll done, and the city paid for the poll. It was a city's initiative. They did a little additional poll to poll the housing affordability and homelessness issue. And that was then decided that would be joined in with this measure. And then additionally, Dan Kalb really has been advocating to have some money for clean water, storm water, because that has been something that doesn't have its own independent funding stream, only funding from another source that's very minor. And the city's under a permit, a regional water quality control permit, and has to manage litter getting into the storm drains, which then get in the creeks and get in the bay. So those three things got married into this measure. It would raise $21 million. It would cost $148 a year for a single-family residential property, and $101 for a multifamily unit, condo or apartment. It's paid by the property owner. It's also assessed to commercial and industrial property on the same basis as Measure D, the library measure, and other measures that the city has passed. There are exemptions for low-income homeowners and low-income seniors, and it's based on the HUD guidelines. You have this document here, and the website for our campaign is on here, and on the very front page is the measure, and that describes those exemptions. There's also exemptions for churches and schools, which are nonprofits. Affordable housing projects have a 50% reduction, and there are a few other little exemptions, and there's going to be a distressed homeowners exemption as well that has not been defined, but it's in there as a component. The other thing is that what we, the advocates, wanted and fought extremely hard to get, because the city administration absolutely did not want it, is we wanted strong accountability measures in this measure. We wanted people to know, because we were going to stand behind this, that the money that's collected is going to go to the things that have been committed to in the measure. As I said, the measure is 21 pages long, and it's very detailed. So what it does commit to is a special fund being created that all this money would go into, an annual independent financial audit every year And it's the 1% of the fund would fund these administrative things, which is about $200,000 a year. A biannual audit by the city's elected auditor. So there's 2 audits. 2 boards and commissions that exist will be taking on the role of being oversight entities. They were not defined in the measure, but there's a brand new homeless commission which is starting up, and there is the Park and Rec Advisory Commission. So they may be the 2 commissions, but there will be 2 commissions that review the plans and budgetary proposals for this measure. There is a maintenance of effort or lockbox in the measure. The library has it in their measure that was passed by the voters. They've had 2 measures that have been passed that have had it, and that basically for the library said you cannot, the general fund that's appropriated to the libraries in this fiscal year you cannot collect the other money if you go below that amount. And we have a similar provision in this. I want to be very transparent. The only difference with it is for the homeless and the clean water, that's exactly how it is, just like it is in the library measure. In the parks area, park maintenance, the funding that has mainly funded park maintenance only brings in $20 million a year. And the total cost of everything that is fundable under this funding source, the LAD, is $28 million a year. So that $8 million, and it's grown over time, has been backfilled by what the city considers one-time funding that does not reoccur. So every budget cycle since probably 2008, they've been trying to patch this together. 2008, we had the layoffs that balanced it. So there's really nowhere else to cut in the park maintenance budget because you can't cut the city's utility bill for the streetlights. You can't cut the water bill for the irrigation in all the parks. You can't cut facilities maintenance unless you're going to pretty much close all the rec centers. So you're really down to people. The other thing that's really important is under parks, we have specific deliverables that are in the measure, that are written in. One of them is athletic fields. Right now, athletic fields are mowed every 3 weeks. In the measure, they will be mowed every other week. Another one is the freestanding restrooms. If any of you walk the lake or go to most parks where they have a restroom, it's usually not clean. Maybe it doesn't have toilet paper. The restroom cleaning is once a day now. It's going to increase to twice a day, 7 days a week. There is a increase in litter pickup. And there is also there is a provision for dedicated staff. Right now, no park in the city has dedicated staff. Every park maintenance person in the city has responsibility over 4 to 8 to 10 locations, and they rove. They're called hubs. They meet at maybe the Rose Garden in the morning, and then they go to 6 or 8 locations around that area. In the measure, there are 3 categories of parks as defined in the city's open space recreation element of the general plan that will get dedicated staff. And that's all going to have to be figured out by the Public Works Department when the measure passes. So those are the larger parks in the city, the Joaquin Miller open space type locations, Lake Merritt, but they're spread out throughout the entire city. There are equity provisions in the measure to make sure that, the whole city gets an equal treatment, and that will also be reviewed by the oversight entities and I'm sure worked out once we know that the funding is in place. So that's the basic overview. I don't know if I mentioned 64% goes to park maintenance, 30% to homeless services, and 5% to clean water, and 1% to administration. And I'll take any questions that you have. Yes?
What sort of powers will the commissions have? For example, will they have their own attorneys, or will they use the city attorney? Will they have kind of power to subpoena documents if they're trying to understand something?
I really can't answer that question. I don't think there's any commissions I know of, except maybe the police commission that has a certain independent role. These are advisory commissions, They're not. The Planning Commission can make absolute decisions. I think the Police Commission probably can, but most commissions, and the Port Commission, of course, but most commissions in Oakland are advisory to the City Council, or they're the end advisor. Like right now, the Park and Rec Advisory Commission is advisory, but they issue permits for different events. So they're going to be more reviewing. I don't know why they would need a subpoena. They have the whole access to every document in the city. I mean, this is not going to be any, the budget's a public document. All that information is public information that any of you can have at any time.
What was the city budget in 2007 before they made the whole city, before they made cuts to the parks?
Right.
And then what is it now? And I'm just curious, if they've now recovered, why isn't there the money already in the budget?
Right. I don't know what the budget was in 2007 off the top of my head. I don't have that information. But the budget now is $28 million, and that is for parks, trees, and it also includes maintenance of the park and recreation facilities, the custodial at the facilities and at the freestanding restrooms, the payment for the city's street lights, which is it's under a landscaping and lighting assessment district, which was put in place in 1989, had a minor increase in 1993 or 4, and has been flat ever since. So there's no CPI in that. There's no increase. There is a CPI. There is a COLA provision in this new measure. So they haven't had any increase, and of course we all know that since even if you go back to 1993 to now, things have increased in cost, whether it's a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, or gas, or whatever. I mean, there's been a huge increase in cost. So over the years, and health costs, there's with the city budget process, they operate on a baseline budget. So if you have $100 last year, if you have 10 positions last year that cost $100, they say, okay, your 10 positions next year are going to cost $150 or $110. And then you as the department and the city staff have to figure out how you're going to fill that gap, where it's going to come from. This function has been funded out of a special fund. It has not been a general fund department like the police department or the fire department. It's a specialized fund. And a lot of the city departments, almost all the city departments other than police and fire, and a few internal administration departments function off of special funds. Ryan's department is mostly special funded, probably all. Most of human services is grants and special funding. Very few of the departments, the library has both their parcel measure and a little bit of general fund. Parks and Rec has some general fund and other special funds. So every department, that's just sort of how the structure of the city departments are in the budget. It's unfortunate, but it's the fact of life. And we have gotten capital money through state park bonds and other different kinds of things that we've built new things, we've renovated things, we've added acreage at Lake Merritt, and we haven't had any new money or any new staffing to take care of it.
So we have time for one quick question. Lightning round question for Brooke.
I just want to mention that you have lawn signs in case you want to support this budget. It's really important. They're right outside. You're welcome to take them when you need.
There was a hand up over here.
Right. Does this measure have anything to do with street trees in the city?
Yes. This measure, park maintenance and tree maintenance are both included in the funding that's going to be impacted by this. And how that gets used, there was no commitment for any delineated deliverable for street trees. Right now, as you probably know, the only tree maintenance in the city is hazardous trees. And it's been like that since 2008. But you as a homeowner can take care of your own trees, and there is a self-service form on the website. But it is definitely, I've done it from my house. I've paid, a lot of money to have my trees trimmed.
You still have PG&E come cut the top.
Well, that's a different thing. PG&E will come give you 3 options for how they cut it, Yeah, so anybody who's done that has known that. So thank you very much. We have a website. You have our card with it on there, and there's a way to communicate with us if you have questions. If you want my phone number, I'm happy to give that to anybody that wants it. You can text me or call me. If anybody wants that, let me know, or come right over here and I'll give it to you. And we look forward to having this passed. We've had lots of endorsements. Oh, on our ballot signatories, we have the League of Women Voters of Oakland, the Sierra Club, Outdoor Afro, the Oakland Tenants Union. No, that's not on the ballot. And one other entity, which I don't recall offhand. We have Labor has endorsed it. The Central Labor Council has endorsed it. Many of the organizations in Oakland that you all know about have endorsed it, besides RCPC. I don't want to try to go too far. So I'm open and available for any questions afterwards.
Thank you, Brooke.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Farmer. I'm the co-secretary of the Rockridge Community Planning Council. And in my professional hat, I work for Alameda County as the executive director of our Complete Count Committee, gearing up for Census 2020. And our Board of Supervisors is taking a lot of leadership on this issue. They recognize so much is at stake with this particular census, and it's so vitally important. So here to tell you a little bit about that is our one person who's very pivotal to this effort, our supervisor, the Honorable Keith Carson.
Good evening to everyone. Good evening. Don't go to sleep on me now. I'm very happy to be here. I've been to a number of your meetings over the years. In fact, a couple of months ago, I was here, snuck in to hear what the topic was. And Casey was at that meeting too. I saw her in the back. I'm here to talk about the census because we're not getting a lot of information about it at this point in time. But as you well know, that the United States Census, which is a part of the Constitution and has been enacted since the early 1700s, is something that is coming up just around March, just around the time of the election. And there are three key and important elements of the census that I want to highlight, and also want to talk about how different this upcoming census will be. Yes, there's representation, and it's about drawing the congressional lines as well as the senatorial lines and the other lines for your representatives. It's about data gathering, and it's about money. And it only takes place every 10 years, right? And as a result of that, money, the data that's captured, we use that information in order to make sure that we federally fund about 130 different federal programs, which are extremely essential in this community for the entire 10 years. So the information that is gathered at the beginning of the year, this 2020, that information, which is so vital, will be used to put monies into federal transportation, education, housing, all of those key areas that impact each and every one of us that are here. This upcoming census is going to be totally different. It's the very first time that we're going to go around and ask people to do and register online. And unfortunately, it's an online program that hasn't been tested. And if you're going to be an enumerator for those individuals who are not comfortable about filling out and giving the federal government information, then they too have to go and apply online to be an enumerator, meaning after April, they'll start coming out, knocking on your door and said, we didn't see that you have electronically filled out all the information for the upcoming census. So you think about it, especially these days, people are going like, cybersecurity? I'm going to give you my information electronically? Then we have a big issue in around people who are saying, I don't want to give the federal government any of my information. For people who might be returning citizens from prison, individuals who may be co-locating in housing that is being subsidized that might not want to give up that information. all of the issues that we're hearing about immigration, people coming into this country illegally, individuals who've been here a long time from other countries, students who are here on student visas, all of those issues which we know are big issues are probably going to have an impact on individuals saying, I'll give you electronically the information you're asking for. We're going to try to get out ahead of that and let people know how important this information is in terms of being able to finance, from a federal perspective, those core programs and key programs that we are so dependent upon. I want to be a little bit more specific because I think once you kind of get the data, some of the data that's given out, then it might hit home a little bit more. Because on the representative side, there's a possibility that we could, if we're undercounted, lose a congressional seat. How important is that today? Right? Here in the state of California. And so if we're not capturing everybody's information and we lose that congressional seat, especially in today's environment, we can get some sense of what that impact could possibly be in Washington, D.C. Even though in the Bay Area we have a pretty good history of having pretty good congressional leadership and representation. Also, if you're not filling out the census, there's a possibility if we were undercounted by 6%, that we would lose over the 10-year period in Alameda County alone $1 billion that would go towards the programs that I made references to. And for people such as myself who have the privilege of representing you on the Board of Supervisors, our statutory and constitutional responsibility is to oversee the health, safety, and welfare of people. So the public hospitals, the clinics, the mental health institutions, social services, the public defender, the district attorney, the sheriff, the jails, all of those things, we're running with 80% of the money, 50% of the money coming from the federal and state government. And so it's very critical that we capture each dollar. So if we're not registering everybody, we could lose $1,000 per person over a 10-year period. And so you can see how that can easily add up to almost $1 billion of lost revenue just here in California alone and just here in the Bay Area alone. More specifically, I want to give you some numbers about Oakland, and then I'm going to stop and take some questions. The last time that we were able to capture some data that might be of importance to you that's very concrete is from 2017. The city of Albany was getting about $101,000 per year from the information that was captured from the census at the beginning of 10 years ago. Berkeley, $11 million a year. Emeryville, $409,000 a year. The city of Oakland, $130 million a year. And just as Brooke was here talking about parks and subsidizing and coming up with ways in which we keep our parks up and operating, or all of the other things that we may have a personal interest in terms of government running, libraries and all of those things, are all being impacted if we're not maximizing the opportunity to get out and get people to completely fill out the census. Just before I stop and see if there's any questions, one of the things that has constantly come up in the presentations that we've been giving, Casey's been kind of heading it up in Alameda County since last summer, and we've been already hosting a number of these presentations, at least in the 5th District, since around last October. Amy Schrago is in the back from our office and has been a part of getting out. We have other people on our staff, other places tonight even, talking about the census. But one of the things that continuously comes up is an undercount in the area of those who are unsheltered. Those who are living in encampments, those who are living on the street, those who might be living in their vehicles, and those who may be couch surfers. What we did in our district was we brought together probably last summer, around summer, August or so, a representation of our community. People from different interest parts of our community, from Piedmont all the way to the unsheltered, from people who represent unsheltered organizations, to kind of think through what are the challenges, what are the problems, what are the things we should try to make sure we focus on in this community. So for the unsheltered, interestingly enough, there will be a team of individuals who will go out at 5 in the morning to sites that they've pre-identified with a law enforcement person and try to capture information of people who are unsheltered. Not sure how encouraging that might be to those who are living unsheltered, right? To have an intruder at your place with a badge and a light, but that's to protect also the people who are going out as enumerators to capture that information. Kind of interestingly enough, one of the individuals who's on the city council in Piedmont, part of the representation, trying to think this through, said, well, we have a lot of students who are staying in our homes during the summer or during the school year, and are they going to be captured in terms of the information? Because we don't want to miss that information. So we have been not only trying to think out critically how to capture every piece of information, how to address the issues such as going out to where individuals are unsheltered. We've been conversing with our congressional leaders who've been talking with the United States Census Bureau about trying to figure out if we can make adjustments in certain areas so that it could be more welcoming in order to get that information. We're going to make sure that we have people who reflect our diversity of our community out there capturing the information, which will probably start around March the 11th, when you'll start probably getting your first notice in the mail. You'll probably start to hear about it on the radio and see a lot more of the advertisements. In April, they'll probably start knocking on your door if you haven't responded and trying to get you to fill out the information. So I want to stop there because of the fact that as we've been hosting these, and we've been hosting a lot of them, we are now finding that once you know there are 3 critical areas: representation, which is critical; data gathering. Don't necessarily want to give up a lot of data, right? But if it's going to be used for 10 years, and out of that data is going to be a formula for how the federal government says we're going to send back information to fund things that come from the Rockridge area that is of interest, it's going to be based on the information that is captured in the census. So I'm going to stop there. I don't know if you have how much time you have for questions and answers. If I can't answer them, we'll get back to you. But if I can't answer them, we have Casey here, so Casey can answer them. So.
Is there any one particular date that, they're going to ask, where were you living on X date? Is that going to be the way it works?
Well, Stuart, I think it's the date that you fill out the information is when they start to capture that information. Other than that, on March the 11th is when you start to get things in the mail. What are you about to say?
Oh, April 1st is the date. That
April 1st, so that's what the...
Not a joke, by the way.
Not an April 1st joke. Why don't we just go all the way around until I'm told you got to stop?
Do you already have your enumerators identified?
No, we're still in the process of capturing enumerators, and I think there's applications for individuals to fill out here. Casey has been excellent in terms of putting together the program for Alameda County and making sure that we get out to each community to try to get them to encourage individuals from
Does
the
the
community.
application specify what are sort of the desired qualifications or characteristics of an enumerator?
I believe it does. And there will be training, but it's online training. And, for many of us who are comfortable with that, that's okay. But there's a lot of people who are not, right?
Yeah, I do genealogy, and traditionally censuses have one person in the household does the, there's a head of household. And so each individual doesn't fill, the enumerator says head of household, used to be wife and children, that kind of thing. And maybe maids, in other centuries, people were living in the home. The question I have is with all our different types of partnerships, will in a couple situation, if one is a couple, does just one person fill it out for the both of you, or does each individual fill out their own?
Well, what they want to make sure is that in that household, you capture all the information that is on the census form, which will ask how many individuals live in
So
this
it's by the
home.
household, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Here's a sample of the questionnaire as well.
Yes.
I feel a lot of tension between, I feel like I've been one of the groups targeted by the federal government, pretty morally feeling, and I want to help everyone here, right, to have money come back. So what's the sort of safest way of proceeding, on paper, or what would you recommend?
Well, like I said, they're trying to, for the first time, capture it all electronically, right? But for those who don't, my mother's 94, and my mother's going like, I'm not filling it out online, right? And so that information, when the enumerators come around, will be captured when they come to your house, and they'll register it that way.
Will the enumerators be carrying a?
They'll be carrying a tablet.
Oh, so there's no paper.
They're trying to do everything paperless to the extent that they
If you
can.
wanted to do paper, could you do that? As
Yes.
an option?
Yes, you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I see. They have person one, person two, so it breaks it down. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. How many questions and what kind of questions are going to be on the census?
I believe it's like one page, right, that will be
9
filled
questions.
out, and there's
9 questions.
9 questions. I thought it was 10, but there's 9 questions. So they're trying to keep it simple, trying to capture what is essential, attempting to find out kind of how many bodies, on some level, what the age range might be, because it projects into the next 10 years who may need what service, in terms of transportation service or healthcare related service, or based on kind of capturing the basic information.
And will they ask, of course, gender and educational level?
Not education, I think just gender.
Just gender?
Yes.
Is there a question on citizenship?
No, there's no question on citizenship. No.
So, question 4 is asking for your telephone number. I don't like that.
I don't know if there's any of those that are optional in terms of opting out not to give your telephone number, because again, they're going to try to capture as much information as that is completely filled out on per household.
But the reason that they say they need the number is if they need to follow up with you to answer any of the, or clarify any of the other responses you've provided. But the supervisor is correct, but that it's not a required field.
Say that again.
It's not a required field, your phone number.
So your phone number is not required.
So you can elect to opt out and not fill out that
I've
part.
heard that 3 or 4 times.
I'll just add that we got some excellent news that law enforcement will not be going out with the enumerators to count those experiencing
good,
homelessness.
good.
We just found out from the Bureau, so, yes, just wanted to clarify.
There was quite a bit of lobbying nationally to try to make sure that didn't happen.
So what if the people are threatened when they do it? I mean, I have some concerns about waking people up on the street at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I'm not going to do it, I'll tell you.
So, since there's been a lot of discussion of that, not only in Alameda County, I was in Sacramento today for a lot of different things, including since the governor just released his budget this week. Counties across the state of California, and I can't say whether or not it's happening every place else, are addressing these issues in a way in which how do we help facilitate to capture that information, because the money comes back to the government to fulfill the needs of the citizens, right? And in this county, we have a lot of different institutions and organizations that are working. It may not seem like that much to you because the population of homelessness is exploding, and you see them in so many places, but that are routinely going to the same places. In Alameda County, we send out teams with a psychiatrist, a doctor, a social worker on a regular basis to the same place. And so we're going to be sending out teams with people who can be comfortable and familiar and help to navigate the landscape, especially for the areas where people are unsheltered.
Will the people who go to, for example, these unsheltered places, will they be pulled from the pool of enumerators that the Census Bureau is collecting?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
But you can specify. You might be able to specify.
We've tried to specify, and they said, no, you can't specify. And so I'm thinking maybe they will relent and let us volunteer.
So I think, and I don't have an absolute answer to this, and I guess this is the last comment. Casey's absolutely right. We started off last year developing a strategy to approach the federal government and say, you can't have law enforcement in full gear go out, right? And we just kept at it with all of our congressional leaders and everybody else, and that's what worked out. And we're constantly trying to refine it, especially when we know that we're not isolated in what we're requesting from the federal government in order to maximize the turnout for the census. We got other allies across the country that are asking the same questions in order to capture that information.
And if I could follow up?
I'm a guest, so I
Can
can't.
you follow up afterwards with that? Because we have another speaker, and I'd like to.
Okay, it's closed.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And Casey, thank you for your leadership.
So our main speaker is Ryan Russo, who is the Oak DOT, Oak Department of Transportation's very first director. He was appointed in May 2017.
Yeah.
My name is Ronnie Spitzer. I have been on and off the RCPC's transportation chair since 1994. And I actually volunteered for a number of years in the bike and pedestrian program in the city of Oakland, so I know the department pretty well. And it's really changed a lot since you took it over. It's total. The equity focus is not something that I ever saw before, and it's just really the things you're doing are really exciting and different. So I wanted to invite him because I just became chair again of the transportation committee about 6 months ago, and I realized we never had him speak. So he was invited, and I hope he'll tell us more about OPDOT.
Awesome, great, thank you, Ronnie. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Ryan Russo. I'm the director of OPDOT, the Department of Transportation, and it is the new year. Happy New Year! And we're a relatively new department, and I've been doing local government work. This is actually my 18th year working for a local government, and I've seen the evolution of folks writing annual reports as to saying what we do and what we've accomplished to doing PowerPoints to just tweeting. And I know that people don't read annual reports, so if you'll indulge me, I'm going to try to play. We thought it might be fun to make... you need this? This is recording me. Yes. Okay, so we'll keep it near this. We made sort of a year-end video to summarize the year, which will cover some things I would otherwise say to you, but then I also have a presentation. So we'll see if we can get this to work and you can hear it. It's just a fun project that we did, which we didn't finish by December 31st. It's actually 99% done. But we'll try.
The Oakland Department of Transportation was formed in 2016 for a purpose much greater than moving vehicles from A to B. It was formed to serve Oaklanders and their values. OPDOT plays a critical role confronting the city's pressing challenges, stabilizing communities, and providing a better quality of life for our residents. As 2019 comes to a close, it is time for OakDOT to reflect and report back on our progress together. 3 years ago, we were asked to build a new department and deliver real change, and we're proud to say that we've made real progress. We're establishing a department that depends on Oakland commitment and expertise, Oakland innovation and leadership, and Oakland values like equity, belonging, justice, and compassion. While we're building, OakDOT has quickly become a national leader in transportation equity. We have much more to do and further to go, but our staff is committed to delivering more authentic engagement with underserved communities, more options to collaborate, and more responsive public service. We are working together toward equitable outcomes and streets that reflect and preserve the culture of residents who have long made Oakland such a special place. We do this work based on 4 core values that guide our decision-making and our investments. The first is equity. Equity is the essential lens through which we pursue every other goal and how we define our other values. We established a chartered racial equity team of staff that helps us examine our procedures and systems with a critical, trained eye so we can build a department that reflects the community we serve. OakDOT is working to center equity in every aspect of our organization. Some of our accomplishments in this work include our nationally recognized paving plan, which invests paving dollars by weighing equally the condition of our streets and the proportion of our underserved communities who live in each neighborhood. We adopted a bicycle plan rooted in community engagement and the needs that our most vulnerable residents voiced. We're working to reduce transportation costs, making sure the right roads are fixed and the best, most affordable range of transportation options are available to those who need them most. And we're giving everyone in our city better ways to get around, working to give seniors and disabled persons more walkable paths, and supporting the production of new housing that Oakland desperately needs. The second core value is safety. Government has no more important responsibility than to keep its communities, particularly our most vulnerable members, safe. We are responding with urgency to the terrible tragedies that happen on our streets, honing our rapid response approach to make more meaningful change swiftly where the most horrific injuries occur. At the same time, we are working to innovate with our designs, our processes, encourage safe choices, and be driven by data to prevent future tragedies. A third core value is sustainability. A sustainable Oakland means building and maintaining infrastructure that improves Oaklanders' transportation choices. These options must be efficient and dependable. We work every day to improve getting around by bike, walking, and taking transit, and making finding a place to park less frustrating. We're building new, innovative infrastructure, and at the same time providing new, innovative choices to get around. Electric scooters, bike share, car share, and more. We are supporting the investment in Oakland's first bus rapid transit service to swiftly carry residents between East Oakland and downtown, helping Oaklanders stay in Oakland by reducing travel cost and time. Our fourth core value is trust. There are no words that can truly build trust. Trust is built by sustained commitment, transparency, accountability, and partnership. As Oakland grows and sometimes struggles with the impacts of that growth, OakDOT is committed to truly serving and responding to the needs of our community. To that end, we are meeting communities where they are, communicating in new ways, establishing more accountable and open communications, and committing to improved responsiveness, even and especially when that means more challenging conversations. We're building more meaningful relationships with communities that have long felt a well-earned distrust for government. And when we face challenges or fall short of our goals, we're building a departmental culture to be forthcoming about those challenges, with ourselves, with our leadership, and with our community, so that we can work together towards solutions and better outcomes for our staff and the community we serve. Our world-class team is at the very heart of our dedication to these values. Our staff have traveled the country to present on our groundbreaking approaches and programs. Their hard work is earning national attention. To our team and to our Oakland community, thank you for a wonderful 2019, and stay tuned for an ambitious, powerful year of new progress ahead.
All right. I feel like the lecturer who was asked to give a guest lecture and brought a video so that they could get out of actually doing the work. But that was not the intent. We just we finished it, 99% done. I noticed some things we need to fix there. And I thought it'd be worth sharing as a foundation. It actually covers a good amount of what I was going to cover in the presentation, so I'll be able to sort of go through some of the slides. So hopefully it gave you a base understanding of our department and the values that we talked about in the video: equity, safety, sustainability, and trust. In terms of what we do and how we were scoped and how we were created, OakDOT's really a creation of a reorganization. Most of our functions were in the city's public works department prior to there being an OakDOT. And the functions that are the management of the streets, that's kind of the at its core. Basically, if you go on the other side of the property line, you walk outside a building, almost everything you see is ours to maintain, design, operate. So we're responsible for paving the streets, repairing the sidewalks, striping the crosswalks, the traffic signals, the street lights. And we also have the parking enforcement team, which historically in Oakland had bounced around. Oakland's done a lot of reorganizing over the years. Parking enforcement had at one point even been in the finance department, which is kind of the wrong attitude to take towards parking enforcement. It's not about raising money. It's about, again, serving our values and what we want to accomplish. It had most recently been in the Oakland Police Department, and they are now with us in the DOT. This presentation just goes over some of the things most communities. First, I'd just like to say thanks for inviting me, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to talk to this community. I've been at RCPC and other meetings all over the city in a couple of years that I've been here, and I want to get through this material quickly because I think it's really important for me and our department to hear what the top issues are and not just tell you what we're doing. But this is just some things that are sort of common that people want when we come to meetings like this. Traffic safety requests, we do strongly encourage people to contact us via the Oak 311 app, calling 311, emailing the main 311 address, and identify what you see. Sort of you're our eyes and ears on the street, but we do get more requests for things like stop signs or speeding traffic than we're sort of resourced to study. So we get about 800 traffic safety requests a year, and to the value of equity and to be data-driven and not squeaky wheel-driven, we are ranking those and being objective in determining which ones get a more in-depth study for further evaluation. So what would happen in the past was people would complain, we would get to some, we would do some, those people would get a response. The ones who we never got to wouldn't get any response at all. So you might have filed a complaint on 311, and we might have said, we looked at it, we ranked it, we're not taking any further action at this time. That might not be super satisfying, but at least you're getting some response from the city. You know, speed bumps are, for example, a great way to calm traffic in your neighborhood, and that's still an application-driven system. A way to improve safety and do traffic calming. The thing that's probably happening the most in the city now is street repaving, and that's where we get the biggest. It's not the best opportunity to completely redesign a street, but it is the most frequent and simple way. And we do take every opportunity to examine a street and engage with communities when we're repaving streets to see how we can make it better. And we'll talk more about paving. In terms of safety, really safety is our number one job in government, keeping people safe. And it's very important to be data-driven. The reality is we have terrible inequities around geography, income, location, demographics, race, in terms of who gets hit by cars, who gets injured in traffic crashes in the city, and I'll show you a map to that effect. It's really disturbing that the purple lines and the purple dots, which is where our data says are the highest injury streets and intersections in Oakland, they track all the way back to the redlining maps in Oakland. And you see this in many cities. They track to where we see concentrations of poverty, concentrations of people of color, single-parent households. Those dark shaded areas track right to the redlining maps, and that's census data that says where folks with disadvantages live. And so, unfortunately, again, being in my 18th year of local government work, when local government does request-driven systems, if those requests don't match where the actual need of the problem is, where the data says, you can actually exacerbate inequities and perpetuate inequities like this. So we're trying to work to reverse those. That's kind of a busy slide, but that's to say that for capital improvements, to spend our capital dollars, we worked with our Public Works Department and the council to do objective ranking of proposed capital improvements, so that, it's not just kind of an earmarking process to develop capital projects. We'll talk about Safe Routes to School. That's another program that allows us to bring traffic calming to communities. So now, I'll go quickly through some recent things. So even with all that talk around equity, the reality is, for this community, we've done a lot, and we're going to do a lot in the future, which is great, because it's, an urban, walkable community. We have a lot of potential for more and more sustainability here. So this is probably the least recent of the recently completed projects. The Broadway and Keith pedestrian and bicycle improvements. We repaved Broadway, did a road diet, and did a number of crossing enhancements, including, unfortunately, in my work of transportation and traffic engineering, we have terrible jargon habits. The new signal that you push a button to cross is either called a hawk or a pedestrian hybrid beacon. Anyway, you push a button, the light turns red, and you get to cross safely. It's one of the first that was built in Oakland, was done here on Broadway. The Broadway Terrace was repaved and the markings refreshed and upgraded. Of course, we've got the repaving, the long-awaited repaving of Shafter Avenue, and then the installation of traffic circles, which I have a feeling there might be one or two questions or comments about tonight. Just a hunch. We know that this community, there's a lot of residential parking permit zones, and a sense that the city has never or doesn't frequently enforce those 2-hour, 4-hour time limits. We are happy to say we have are breaking in new license plate readers, which allow us to much more efficiently and effectively do enforcement of residential parking permit zones. It's been something that your council member has pushed me and our department on a lot, and I do want to acknowledge Lisa in the back as a colleague. Councilmember Kalb's office has been a steadfast champion for this community, asking us to do a lot of the things that you see and that we do eventually do. And this is one of the issues that I think 2020 will be very much improving our performance. We have some data about that. Ultimately, we are a Department of Transportation and want to improve and give as many options as possible how you can get around to try to save people the cost of every single adult over the age of 18 having to own, lease, pay insurance, maintenance, taxes for their own individual automobile. So Oakland is a leader around shared use mobility, starting with the Bay Area's first free-floating car share program, Gig Car Share. You can use now your mobile phone and get access to a whole variety of shared use mobility. We've got our bike share program, which was launched in the middle of 2017. We've got shared scooters, electric shared scooters, which are available, which started being permitted last summer. And then just last week, we've got Revel shared electric mopeds, which just launched. There's now going to be 1,000 all over the city of Oakland as another transportation option. So those are the things that have happened. There's a lot to come. I'll go through this quickly, and maybe during the Q&A we'll come back to it. College Avenue will get repaved eventually. It's being designed and worked on. We're hoping this year or early next year, now that we're in 2020, with upgrade and that's a sidewalk widening near Market Hall to make walking to and from the BART station into the community even safer. Claremont Avenue near the Colombo Club, which is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. If any members of the Colombo Club here? My last name's Russo, so they're trying to recruit me, and I'm thinking about whether to join. They have a lot of speeding traffic in front of the DMV. People who walk to the restroom at the Colombo Club from the farmers market. That's going to get a road diet, traffic calming, and crossing enhancements. Chabot Elementary is funded under our Safe Routes to School program, so I know there's a chaotic drop-off scene over there, and there's going to be a traffic circle and crossing enhancements implemented in the future. We've got, this helps folks to the north who were biking up Tunnel Road and walking in this area, Tunnel Road, Caldecott. We've got re-engineering and safety improvements coming to that intersection up above 24. And then paving. Some pretty important streets are on our paving plan. Miles Avenue, which I think, people are exiting freeway mode and entering city mode. I think we have some opportunities maybe to make that a safer, more pleasant street with the road repaving. 51st Street from Shafter to Telegraph will be paved, and bike lanes will be added on that street this year. And then Telegraph Avenue on the border of the community, getting a redesign and parking protected bike lanes and pedestrian improvements, hopefully in the first quarter of 2020. Local street paving, again, we are very proud that we used equity as a lens through which to do our paving plan, our adopted paving plan, and that plan was unanimously approved by the City Council. And we used a mix of equity considerations and, of course, how bad the streets are. For better or for worse, this neighborhood has lots of streets that then qualified under our objective metrics to make it into our 3-year paving plan. So the streets you see listed, a lot of them to the, say, west of College Avenue and to the north of 24. There's a real concentration of local streets that will be paved over the next 3 years. So if you're in that quadrant of the neighborhood, congratulations. So with that, again, really excited for the opportunity. Thanks for watching the video. These are ways to contact us. It's really the best way to document if you have an issue, to get it in our system, get your service request number, and then you can follow our work. Hopefully the finalized version of that video will be posted on our Twitter or Facebook and Instagram, and you'll be retweeting it and sending it to your friends and neighbors. So with that, thanks again, and look forward to hearing what you want us to focus on in the future or questions that you have.
So we're going to do the questions a little differently than we have for the prior two speakers. Everyone has cards at their seat.
And if you don't have a card, we have one.
A little shout out to Oakland voters, also from Measure KK, for making some of this happen.
Yes.
So the first question is, studies show that decreasing car speed limits dramatically reduce pedestrian fatalities. Does OCDOT have plans to reduce speed limits on city streets? Could you discuss?
Ooh, great question. Yes, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is we are working with the City Council. We had a couple, and we have this every year, terrible tragedies near schools in Oakland. We lost a mother and her son in a crosswalk walking from their neighbor to a laundromat on Foothill Boulevard in 26. You saw our response there. And a neighborhood mother right near Garfield Elementary was killed towards the end of last year. And the City Council has responded, and we're developing legislation with them which would allow us to reduce speed limits around schools in particular. Unfortunately, around speed limits, our hands tend to be tied by California law. There's a rule known as the 85th percentile rule, which is on a big street, the speed limit must be set after you do a survey of 100 vehicles and you set the speed limit at the 85th fastest speed. where basically the commons sets the speed limit, sets the law. And unfortunately, that means if everyone's driving fast, we can't actually set a low speed limit. It's insane.
Seriously, if everybody's driving too fast, you cannot lower the speed limit.
Correct.
Why?
Because
Why not?
You said it's state law.
Yeah, state law.
It's a state law.
Correct. And I love your anger because it should be challenged. We
Yeah,
tried to
because
get the
people are going to get killed.
And they
Someone
do.
has already gotten killed.
Yes. So the idea is that when automobility first spread, local communities didn't like people driving fast through their towns and their main streets, their college avenues, and they would set very low speed limits and then write tickets to those foreigners from other counties driving through. And we were protecting motorists by basically allowing motorists to set their speed limits by setting these laws. And in Los Angeles, which had a terrible traffic fatality problem in the last few years and announced a program called Vision Zero, they studied and found which streets they needed where everyone was getting killed on and said, we want to do speed enforcement. Their speed surveys were out of date and they had to update them, and people were driving faster, and they had to raise the speed limits in order to make the streets safer so that the police could write speeding tickets. It is an insane law, and it is the way California and most of America has worked. And so I know this isn't a Rockridge issue, but we can lower the speed limit around schools, and when we have our local legislation, we'll share it, of course, and would love for you to come to city council meetings to sort of say that this is an important issue to you.
Great. We can use the Rockridge News as a way to inform the community about those opportunities. Thank you. The second question is, what is the city's pothole policy?
We fill them. We fill them with an asterisk. So historically, we internally have had maintenance crews that could only do small repairs to streets, filling potholes, crack sealing. And when we got money to pave streets, we would do construction contracts. Measure KK, the infrastructure bond, which is basically why our department exists and allowing us to do a lot of the work that you saw in the 3-year paving plan, we're attacking paving from two angles. We're still doing contracting paving, but building an in-house paving team to repair, to do paving in-house. The building of that has been a slow process, and so we have to trade off the permanent repair, healing the sickness, which is paving, versus the Band-Aid, and that's what a pothole is. And there was 2018, we were sort of limited, and we didn't fill as many potholes as the year before, and then the winter of 18-19, the one we just came out of, was very wet, and we had kind of a spike in potholes, and we fell behind, which is why the pothole vigilantes were invented or came up. And we have since staffed up both our paving team and our pothole team. We have sort of enough that we're keeping up. And right now, for the first time in many years, the number of requests we get in for potholes through 311, we're closing out in equal to or even more than what we receive. So I welcome people reporting potholes to us.
And we'll have another pothole blitz to fill them all shortly after the rain.
Yes, we will.
Okay, great. The next one is about planning. How do respective departments, planning, transit, OUSD, public works, etc., in the city coordinate regarding development plans before and during the approval process?
So we work very closely, particularly kind of in a hub around our planning and building department, which is kind of where those development applications go through, and we've developed close working relationships with them in particular around the transportation needs of a new development, and we do thorough examinations of what the potential impacts of those developments are, and then make recommendations as to what might be needed in terms of pedestrian improvements, bike improvements, and even transit improvements.
Great. Another question is, why aren't motorists who park in bike lanes ticketed as a safety issue? Planning should coordinate with enforcement.
So one of the stats in that video, it flashed on the screen, is actually that our bike lane enforcement under OCDOT is up around 40%, I believe, based from 2016. I have the exact numbers that I can look up that we're actually writing more tickets for people double parking in bike lanes.
I think this is also getting at how we report when someone might have parked in a bike lane. What is
Okay.
the reporting mechanism?
So you can report violations via 311, and we do have staff who are kind of monitoring. The way we have an intake center, the 311 center, where they answer the phone, but we also have our parking enforcement team has a dispatch during business hours. There's a 10-digit phone number to that office, but you can still call 311, and we will dispatch to folks to try to get to, we don't necessarily, can't get to every time someone's reporting and catch them in the act, but we're doing that for many of them.
Great. All right. What is the possibility that OCDOT would do a comprehensive area-wide transportation study, and perhaps by an objective outside agency?
So by comprehensive, does the questioner mean for the city of Oakland or for a neighborhood? Yeah. So area-wide studies usually come when the city's doing specific planning for a neighborhood, which is usually around shaping development and concentrating development. So that would generally be when we would get a broader transportation look. We also can do neighborhood traffic calming studies, which in certain cases, actually your neighbors, the Adora Park area has a lot of people from Berkeley who make a left on 56 to cut to the 24 and a lot of cut through traffic, and we sort of did a mini little study there to try to mitigate, and we did some initial steps. So depending on the scale of the issue, we can do a study, but a lot of it's going to depend on our staff capacity and the funding. We apply for planning grants, but again, what we see, what I'd like to say about that is where we think planning is really needed is sort of to an earlier question around the issues of new development. Ultimately, transportation kind of serves no end, and things like housing and homelessness and affordability and sustainability are much higher priorities than how you get around. Obviously, you need to get people around if you're going to have those things. So where the city is growing is where we think we need to figure out, new networks, new bike lanes, new transit investment, that kind of thing. So that's where we're generally putting our planning study resources to.
Okay. And this question asks you to comment on the safety and access issues at the ingress and egress from the narrow Clifton Street for the planned development of 589 units at the CCA site, especially during emergencies. Are you able to comment on something underway
I don't
like
think
that?
I could. I'd have to get back to you or look at the planning for the development at that point.
Okay. Save that. I'll send that one home with you.
Yeah.
What is the City of Oakland's position on creating dedicated bike lanes at the Bay Bridge, on the Bay Bridge?
We're big fans, and we're happy to see that there's been strong progress around what the design would need to be. And another thing that we're championing, we're a little frustrated that the new span of the Bay Bridge, the east span, has a multi-use path, but if you've ever ridden to it, it kind of biases to Emeryville and Berkeley, kind of dumps you next to IKEA, and if you want to get there from downtown Oakland, West Oakland, or even here, it's very hard to get to, and there are plans that MTC, the Bay Area Toll Authority, that were to potentially put a connection that would come through kind of the port in West Oakland and help connect Oakland to that even better. So we see that as an and. So if they're going to build the full connection, it should connect to Oakland.
Great. Does the C-Click Fix app still exist, or has that been replaced by 311?
C-Click Fix still exists. It's sort of a private sort of company that has the back end for. So if you're comfortable with that, you can continue to do it. We've done sort of a skin on top, the Oak 311 app, which is a little more, hopefully, user-friendly, a little more Oakland-specific. But C-Click Fix is the back end. Oak 311 is kind of the brand on top.
Okay, great. What was the traffic study that proved the necessity for traffic circles? Actually, we have a lot of these questions. I want to add them all together. Try to go quickly here. When will electric bikes come back to the bike share?
First, I just want to say this format's very efficient. You should like it. I feel like I'm Ken Jennings on Jeopardy or something.
You
It's
look
like
at the group. You don't have to look at me.
Never had to answer so many questions at a public meeting before. Am I getting scores?
Also say we consolidate, there are a lot of questions on Chapter Avenue. We've consolidated some of them, but we will make sure that our representative knows how many comments were received. When there are duplicative ones, we can move them.
So the question was e-bikes returning to our bike share system. I met with our shared mobility staff today for an update on the negotiations with Lyft, who's the operator, on the terms of them sort of coming back. And we'll be submitting a report to the City Council, the Public Works Committee, and it will be heard, I believe, we expect it to be heard February 11th, an update on that, which we're targeting March. Assuming we can work out all the kinks, we're targeting March for having those bikes back on the street.
Great. There was a question. When are you going to tell bicyclists and scooterists that pedestrians have the right of way? As a senior flattened by a bicyclist in a crosswalk, I have issues with bicyclists and scooterists not following traffic laws.
Yeah. We've definitely heard that concern. I've heard that concern in the 18 years of doing bicycle and pedestrian-friendly planning. We certainly encourage all street users to make wise choices. We think if everyone makes sort of thoughtful and caring choices when they're on the streets, we'll all be much safer. The reality is, though, we do have 40,000 deaths a year from traffic crashes, and they pretty much are all from motor vehicles.
I'm sorry, 40,000
nationally.
A year. Nationally. Sorry. Yeah.
Just saying.
Be a lot of people we wouldn't be able to count in the census.
Yeah.
That's all I think about. All right. One last question on paving. When will all of Oakland streets be repaved?
Every city never paves all their. They're all paved now, but by the time you finish, they're just not well paved, or the paving is 80 years old. By the time you're done, unfortunately, you would need to start again, because at the rate that you do the work. But just to give people a sense of scale, thanks to Measure KK, we have over 800 miles of streets, and we are now, this calendar year, we hope to pave around 30 miles. And with that funding, which will run out in about 7 years, we will be continuing to build our capacity. So, hopefully we'll have a program where we could pave about 50 miles a year. So to actually answer 50 a year, if we kept that funding and pace level, that's 16. That's a 16-year cycle, which would be impressive.
How does OakDOT interface with transit operators for BART and AC Transit?
We meet with them regularly. AC Transit more often than BART. We obviously can approve where the bus stops are, but they have their preference because they're operating the bus, but there are streets, so there's an inherent collaboration. We've been collaborating on a lot of things like the Line 51 improvements, which were signalization improvements to try to speed up the bus. You might see the funny signals that exist at College and Broadway. That was something we had to approve the engineering and work together on. And then bigger things like the Bus Rapid Transit project running from San Leandro to downtown Oakland. Tons of coordination with them on that. When we do the road diets, the Telegraph Avenue projects, we want to make sure that we incorporate the transit operators' feedback, so we work closely with them. We're actually really proud of the improvements to the relationship between the City of Oakland and AC Transit. There was a lot of tension there that we've worked through. For BART, there's less day-to-day coordination, but we are meeting with them regularly to discuss planning issues. They're very interested in site access. As development happens, they want to see bicycle-friendly streets, pedestrian-friendly streets, and other things so that people can get to the stations by as many means as possible. So we're meeting with them and coordinating with them about that. And then they're really kicking off the planning for a potential second BART crossing, which is one of the biggest needs for transit in the Bay Area. And, they're doing that preliminary study work, and we need to make sure Oakland's voice is heard about how they're figuring that out, and whether that's going to cross and go to Fremont or cross and go to Oakland. And guess where we think it should cross.
All right, a little wonky question here. Are there plans for updating the circulation element of the general plan?
Good question.
Good.
Yes.
Short summary of what the circulation element is.
Yeah, so the transportation element. So cities adopt a general plan. And
Circulation element of general plan.
yeah, it's transportation and circulation. It's kind of a synonym. The City of Oakland's general plan is from the 90s, and the Planning and Building Department is going to be kicking off this year an effort to scope and then eventually update the general plan. And what Oakland does is a combined land use and transportation plan, and we will be at the table and with the Planning and Building Department updating that together.
Okay. These are two questions about particularly dangerous intersections at Crossing East on Telegraph at 51st, near the new construction, as well as Broadway and Lawton. The stoplight is still not functioning. When will it be replaced?
Which one?
Fixed. Broadway and Lawton.
There's a stop.
That's the pedestrian-oriented light. You have to push the button for the light to turn red for the cars.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not for the cars.
It stops the cars.
Oh, I see.
It's
Okay.
the industry of traffic engineering doesn't innovate frequently, and because we don't want to confuse people, you don't want to like change a stop sign from, the shape, but we change something, and that's one of the newest things is on these types of intersections to have a dark signal, so there's no traffic signal at all until a pedestrian pushes a button and it does a bunch of blinks, turns solid red, stops all the cars, and gives you a safe crossing. It's called either a HAWK or a PHB, a pedestrian hybrid beacon.
Okay, so this crossing that they're referencing is 51st and Telegraph, just east, kind of where the edge of the construction is underway, but not at the large 51st and Broadway intersection. So will that be addressed?
So 51st and Telegraph?
51st and Telegraph.
Clark. They may not know.
Okay.
They're talking about
the little
next
street.
Right, the small
Because that's
street.
Claremont.
That recently got, the development was conditioned to improve the crossing,
So
my
it's coming
understanding.
soon.
Well, I think it had the high visibility crosswalk and some signs put
It's
in.
a flashing yellow. You press the button and it's not a red light. It's
Right.
a flashing yellow light.
Mhm.
Cars that are traveling down 51st at a higher speed than other streets can't stop in time, so they
Mhm.
either come to a screeching halt, which causes an accident, or they disregard it and go through it, and there's a crosswalk there.
Right.
So people are getting
Got it. So that's good feedback. That's a new treatment for that location, and those, again, in other jargon, the kind of light when you push and there's a yellow sign and it blinks, that's called an RRFB, which stands for Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon, and those are coming up more in Oakland, and studies have shown that those are actually generally quite effective. You might have seen two near the YMCA, 23rd and Broadway, 24th and Broadway. That's a little more kind of urban and is working better. I could see there maybe being concerns at 51st and Clark, and what we'll have to do is look and see maybe there's some visibility issues or the such.
Great. So how can OakDOT encourage seamless transit in the Bay Area, such as schedule coordination, fare cap, single transit map, or integrated signage?
Yeah. So by being engaged with MTC, how many of you in the room know who MTC is if I say who MTC is? So this is like a very sophisticated room, and it's still only half. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is the 9-county Bay Area's transportation planning and funding agency, and they decide, they sort of dole out the federal and the state money to the transit operators and cities and counties, and they're quite powerful. And I'm happy to say that our mayor has been a commissioner the last 3-4 years, which Oakland didn't historically have a seat at the table, and without an OakDOT, we didn't have strong contacts with the staff. And there is a sort of a committee called the Bay Area Partnership, in which that MTC has organized, that has all the region's transit operators and the county congestion management agencies, and OCDOT was appointed to that body as well. So I'm attending those meetings where issues of regional transit coordination are discussed. And because we don't have a parochial interest like, say, an AC Transit or a BART on protecting our turf, we can be strong advocates for a better integrated regional transit system.
Okay.
Oh, so we're done, right? We're
very close. We've held everyone in suspense.
No, I was kidding. That was a joke. That was a Shafter joke.
This is, and it's a very important question.
Yeah.
How does a person who is,
legally blind, how am I supposed to know when to cross the street?
with the hawk light?
Weird lights.
Yeah.
Is there sound associated?
How is he supposed to know it's safe for him to cross the street?
So the lights are a warning to the drivers, and it's not a traffic control device that says you stop, like a red, yellow, or green. It's just enhancing the visibility of the yield sign so that they can that hopefully they recognize that their obligation is to yield.
The RFP or the hawk light?
The RFP. The RFP.
Were you talking about the hawk light or the RFP?
Yeah.
Which one? There's no sound.
The Lawton one with where that turns red. You don't need a sound on the flashing yellow lights because it's not giving an indication to the pedestrian per se. But for when you get a walk signal or a don't walk signal, you should have an audible signal for every new installation.
Because it mirrors the red light.
Correct. Yeah, it tells you that it's safe to cross and provides a chirp and a directional indication. So that should have been done with an audible signal. The one on Broadway, if it's not, we should. It is okay.
All right. So getting to the end here, how does OCDOT plan to address the concerns that arise about the safety on Telegraph, specifically speaking to Temescal residents who feel ignored by the planning process? Specific to, I think maybe the Telegraph repaving or...
Yeah. I think the redesign. So I think there's two things there, the safety concerns and the feeling ignored by the planning process. So the safety concerns is that the status quo, the current condition, has significant safety concerns. It's one of our high crash corridors. It's one of the most active pedestrian corridors, and it's where we see lots of severe injuries. So that's why we think it's really important to act. In terms of the planning and the process, it's important to know that we've been talking about the future of this section of Telegraph Avenue for about 20 years. And in our community presentations, we outlined that history. We did some significant community engagement to help make a choice as to what the treatment would be. We had been directed by the City Council a couple of years earlier to come back with a focus to decide exactly what kind of bike facility would be included in that design. We recognize that some people are disappointed with the outcome of that, but I definitely stand by our process, especially because then the City Council again adopted the plans that we're doing. So we did give an opportunity during those forums and then during the City Council process to hear from everyone.
All right, long awaited. The Shafter traffic circles. Okay, so there's a couple different concerns I'll weave together here. Please reinstall the four-way stops. Sounds like that is coming. The Shafter traffic circles are a hazard. This is without the stop signs, which are coming back. Will OCDOT will bring them back?
Would they remove the traffic circles?
Will they remove the traffic circles?
Or will they remove the traffic circles when they bring the signs back? All right, thank you.
Okay.
And what was the traffic study that proved the necessity for the traffic circles?
Yes. Right.
So kind of explaining that process. And additional signage about the installation. People are feeling like that wasn't made available. Why were there no signs informing the neighborhood that the traffic circles would be installed? And when are the signs going to go back in on Shafter, stop signs? And then about kind of a follow-up to that is what will enforcement look like after the fact for cars and bikes at the stop signs? And can there be a study or a review done within a 2 to 3 month period to evaluate the reinstallation of the stop signs?
Okay. Great. All right. So there definitely was planning and engagement, I think, presentations here around the intent to install the traffic circles. The notion of the installation was that what you found in many cities and many places is that putting this big physical thing in the middle of an intersection generally gets people to drive quite slow and quite carefully. And in places where circles have sort of come with an intersection initially, or like before there were stop signs or other things, in residential neighborhoods, they tend to be quite effective in calming traffic and making walking, biking, and driving a relatively pleasant experience. There are many, and in many of these locations, you don't even need stop signs at all because you have this big thing in the middle of the intersection. That has proven not to be the case here on Shafter Avenue. Unfortunately, by having the circles and then having them be what we call stop on minor, meaning only stop signs on, say, we call the Clifton and Hudsons of the world the minor street because they have less traffic volume, not because we don't love the people on Clifton and Minor as much as we love the people on Shafter. The minor streets, that the major street, Shafter Avenue, had a certain amount of traffic volume and a certain amount of traffic behavior, and that they didn't slow down as much as we would like. The ones without a stop sign, people with the Priuses, they figured out how to do that S-turn. You figure it out, you commute every day, maybe you live in a different neighborhood and 24 is backed up. They're driving that faster than we thought they would. And then by having the minor streets with the stop signs have a little bit more traffic volume than you would think as minor streets because of the freeway entrances. And so with that combination, with the speed, there was not enough visibility and time for the folks driving on the side streets to find a safe gap to get across because there was this big circle in the way. And so, and people kind of have this idea that this notion is that the first one in the circle gets priority. But the other notion is that the person without the stop sign gets priority. And we were basically giving people two sets of rules. And what became clear was that we confused people. And we heard about that confusion from pedestrians, from local residents, from motorists. We heard from it. And what we had done, we realized we had done something new. And whenever we do something new, we're always going to study it and look at it and say, is this going well or does this need adjustments? And our engineering team went out, saw what I just described, and ultimately, because of the ambiguity of those rules and because the amazing ability of drivers to swoop around, that we think what's best is to reinstall the four-way stops. And that work to reinstall the four-way stops is scheduled for February.
Let me ask a question. Now,
I hope that I've captured most of your things here, but a follow-up. Okay, go ahead.
Now, I don't think that ambiguity is part of the problem. But the problem is that right now, when you have a car entering on one side, having to wait for a pedestrian because the roundabouts force the cars into the pedestrian walk lane. Another car will enter the circle. He's trying to get around there, and he can't because the other person's waiting for a pedestrian. Then another car comes around that circle. I've seen 3 cars backed up around a circle with a pedestrian wanting to go across. I think the main problem is that intersection, is too small to accommodate all the... The driver has to go into the pedestrian walk and stop to get around. And they're going to hit a pedestrian, and lucky they haven't hit one now.
Who the survivor of the victim who gets really smashed by one of the cars, who they sue? The city of Oakland, the state of California, or both of you?
What roundabouts have to go.
So I think that we have, there are many people here, and I know that people want to continue having a discussion. So it's 9:00 and the meeting is ended essentially. And if you want to continue, would you mind staying a little bit and having people talking to people? Yeah. If people want to continue talking about the Shafter roundabouts, please stay and talk to Director Russo.
Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you. Thanks for watching the video.